Episode 80 of Small and Gutsy is Mountain Hazelnuts, a social enterprise, and truly amazing. In fact, so amazing that we decided to break the episode into two parts. Part one gives you background and a bit of history of how it came about, and part two talks more about the operation of the organization. So we're excited for you to hear both episodes. So here goes. Begin with episode 80, part one, Mountain Hazelnuts. We hope you enjoy.
When you think of sustainability, what comes to mind? Is it protecting the environment proactively and effectively managing the climate for future generations to enjoy versus using up what we have and finding other planets in which to inhabit? The old throwaway concept and let someone else deal with it. Those someone else's are our children and grandchildren. Maybe it's sustainability through community health efforts or education, so we leave the world a better place as more people have greater needs. Have you ever had the experience of observing something that doesn't seem to be going well? It seems too complex to solve, but that something just keeps gnawing at you, making you wonder if there were a way to address multiple issues at the same time. It could be in the sciences, the arts, the environment, agriculture, healthcare, your community. Those I interview for Small and Gutsy have made huge contributions to these areas and have, in fact, changed the world. Maybe in their part of the world, but they are making a difference. Barbara Minto of McKinsey Consulting fame, actually, I think was the first female MBA executive hired there, developed a concept called the Minto Pyramid. Basically, it's a method by which to communicate complex data issues into easy to understand information quickly while highlighting the key solution or solutions. How to approach a problem from a range of vantage points that have been researched to what Minto coins Mies, her pronunciation, or Misi, as Kinsey calls it. And it's defined as mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive, meaning each set of data points in a subsection are independent of the other, with depth and breadth in order to emerge with the best solution. Each set of data points in and of themselves might be great as a rationale for a single solution, but not good enough to really address the deeper complex systemic issues. One couple, two of my three guests today, are folks who saw a global market need and a sustainability opportunity within an existing complex system, agriculture, that could address multiple issues with a single solution that would build community while yielding greater economic sustainability. In this case, we call that a social enterprise, and I imagine we'll find out in a moment that depth, breadth of research, and community relationship building, including trust, was at the foundation of their Minto-type pyramid. Welcome to Small and Gutsy, our podcast featuring nonprofits and social impact organizations under $10 million. My name is Dr. Laura Witkoff, and I'm excited and proud to be your host. We hope you'll love the stories as much as we do, and perhaps you will find needed services, a job, volunteer, invest in, or donate. And for all of you followers, Small and Gutsy has just been granted nonprofit 501c3 status. We are thrilled to have moved in this direction, enabling us to continue to meet our vision of interviewing as many smaller nonprofits and social impact organizations as we can. So please pass along any valuable information you hear today to others and send me the name of any organization you'd like featured at lwitkoff@gmail.com. That's 2 T's and 2 F's. Mountain Hazelnuts, founded by a husband and wife team, Teresa Law Spitzer and Daniel Spitzer, is that social enterprise producing premium quality hazelnuts in Bhutan. Established as a public-private community partnership with the Royal Government of Bhutan, the company provides hazelnut trees, agricultural inputs, and technical assistance to support smallholder farmers. At maturity, the company purchases hazelnuts from partner growers, which it then processes for international export. Quite an amazing feat. The company is committed to supplying high-quality hazelnuts from the world's largest hazelnut nursery in Bhutan, while being a fabulous role model in enacting how business can serve as a tool for achieving positive social and environmental impact. Mountain Hazelnuts enables thousands of smallholder farming households and community organizations to generate long-term income, revitalizing vulnerable communities through sustainable agriculture. And if that isn't enough for you, the hazelnut orchards stabilize mountain slopes, reduce erosion, improve watershed retention, and mitigate climate change by improving soil fertility and carbon sequestration, which is a method of reducing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere with the goal of reducing global climate change. I cannot think of a better example of a win-win-win. Win for the business owner, win for the farmer, and win for the community/environment. I am so honored to introduce my guest today. And just an FYI here, nothing I've prepared really does justice to the incredible contributions these individuals have made, and not just with Mountain Hazelnuts. So here goes. Teresa Law Spitzer, co-founder and CFO of Mountain Hazelnuts, who worked in banking for 20 years, including senior roles for JP Morgan and Citibank in Hong Kong, the Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia, Taiwan, and the USA. Prior to joining Mountain Hazelnuts, Teresa served as chair of a development organization that works with HIV-impacted communities through social programs and income generation schemes. Actually, Teresa, I want to talk to you about that. So for many years, I actually worked in HIV prevention on various grants, so I'm a huge fan. Teresa received a BA from Westmont College and an MBA from Columbia University. Not too shabby. Daniel Spitzer, co-founder, chairman emeritus, and group CEO, who, as a serial entrepreneur, has founded and led several companies in Asia and has successfully combined financial objectives with social and environmental goals, including Plantation Timber Products Group, PTP, which he built into China's largest sustainable forestry company. PTP established $200 million of new facilities to process logs grown by 700,000 farmer partners in deforested Himalayan foothills and vulnerable river regions in the interior of China. Daniel started his career in finance and was partner and managing director of a major private investment fund and managing director of a global merchant bank. Daniel received a BA from University of California, Berkeley, and a master's from Stanford University. Also not so shabby. And Justin Finnegan, who after working for Mountain Hazelnuts in Bhutan for 4 years and a founding member of the operations team, now serves as director of the company and currently serves as a senior advisor of Bloomberg New Economy and as an advisor to a private investment group. He has a rich history, and I'll try to do a bit of justice to that. During his hiatus from Mountain Hazelnuts, he was selected as one of 12 White House fellows under President Obama, who, as I understand it, says something pretty favorable about Mountain Hazelnuts, which hopefully we'll hear shortly. While at Harvard College, he became passionate about Chinese studies. He was awarded various fellowships funding several years of research, specifically immersion in rural China, which provided insights into both local culture and the suffering of poor farmers in general. As a Fulbright and Trustman scholar, he researched sustainable farming in Himalayan villages. Justin helped develop the Asian operations of a leading global textile firm where he gained operational experience. Subsequently, he joined the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, with responsibility for a $1 billion budget focused on reduction of hunger, poverty, and malnutrition in the developing world. He later moved to Bloomberg to help establish a new media and event platform convening global leaders to focus on Asia-related issues. He served as founding managing director and MD APAC for Bloomberg New Economy, BNE, which he helped launch the media and event platform in 2017 and was responsible for global strategy, thought leadership, and government relations. This enabled him to focus on international collaborations and personally meaningful issues related to climate technology and cancer mitigation, which Justin already offered to give me some wise words, so I will take him up on that. Justin received a BA from Harvard College and an MBA from Stanford University. You can see my 3 guests today are pretty high-powered in and of themselves and still choose to give back in the social landscape. Pretty amazing. I think they've wrestled with the balance between business ambition and social consciousness, and hence it's why they, among other experts and local community members at Mountain Hazelnuts, have been so impactful and successful in this social enterprise. So that was a mouthful, everyone, but for really good reason. Let's get started. Welcome, Teresa, Daniel, and Justin. Please share with me your passion in starting Mountain Hazelnuts. And you all have an incredible wealth of experience in community and business experience. Why this particular project? What drove you to this? And I don't know, Dan, if you want to start, or Teresa as co-founding members, and then Justin, I'll throw it to you.
So Teresa and I had lived in Asia for about 30 years before starting Mountain Hazelnuts, and we had experienced uh, change and the challenges, demographic shifts, loss of culture, breakdown of community fabric. We had seen the impacts of climate change. We've seen deterioration from overpopulation and all those kinds of issues. Having lived in the Himalayas, I had seen what happened to communities over the years, and we had already had our own professional careers, and we were comfortable in terms of those sorts of achievements, and we wanted to continue to work with communities and do things that were meaningful. And we'd never worked together besides raising our children, which was work, but also great joy. This is a new form of collaboration, and at times even more challenging than raising our kids. But we survived 13 years of it, so it's okay. We saw these challenges, social and environmental, and we knew that part of the piece was actual direct interventions in the environment, and some of it was generating income. We thought about how to generate income. Um, we had been involved in building and financing different businesses. For me, agroforestry was really interesting, and I saw the opportunity in planting trees. And we realized that at scale, if we planted 10 million trees, we could involve roughly 10% of the population of this very small country, which 10% is enough to make a meaningful change in society and to teach a traditional society about um, competitive dynamics, about a performance culture, introduce different ideas, and Teresa will talk more about this in society, like empowering women as managers and so forth, and working with different levels of society. So for us, this seemed like a really meaningful endeavor. So we initially funded it out of our own pockets before drawing on some of our traditional partners, the World Bank and people like that. And so that's kind of, from my perspective, how we developed this configuration of different solutions that we thought would address various challenges. But Teresa inevitably has a different perspective on things.
Just quickly, but why hazelnuts specifically? Were they already producers in the country? Did you see a need in the rest of the world? I mean, hazelnuts are one of my favorite nuts, frankly. So I was like, this is great.
There are indigenous varieties of hazelnut, but there was no industry. It happened to be a global shortage at that time. The biggest producer is Turkey, and Italy is also very big, but between the two of them, they're like 85% of world supply. And it's great vulnerability for value add manufacturers, chocolate makers, and so forth, and for consumers like you. We recognized that it was important. Important meaning valuable and an opportunity. Also, there was a big scientific piece, and we had some very strong scientists on our team. Our chief scientific officer is one of the most innovative scientists globally in this field, Andrew Watson, and we're really fortunate that he gave us a lot of the vision of how we could micro-propagate many millions of trees and then build these huge
Right.
plantations and nurseries, especially in the nurseries that Justin was primarily responsible for developing.
Yeah.
Anyway, hazelnut, there's money in hazelnuts.
Who knew? You did, which is great. Teresa, you're on. So take it from there.
When Daniel was thinking of developing this business, I said, "Oh, I could help. I guess. We'll see what if there's a role for me." And when he broached the idea of Bhutan, I thought, "Wow, that would be interesting. I've never been there." And I felt that, you know, if you do something on this scale in other countries like China, it's a drop in the bucket. But in
Mm-hmm.
a place like
Good
Bhutan,
point. Mm-hmm.
where we could bring our skills and our interests and kind of combine it together, we could probably have a larger impact. I also made a quip to Daniel that, I was the cheapest CFO that he could afford because I was free. So that was a plus for
Too
him.
funny.
That was my part of my resume. Being an Asian woman in Bhutan, I have sort of not an entree, but people can relate to me, and they tell me their stories, and they call me like Ama, like a mother. And so I heard different stories of their challenges, and I could see how we could use Mountain Hazelnuts as sort of a platform to address these issues without being like, the savior. I was just a woman, a mother, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I happened to be a professional, but we could work with our staff and the communities. We also decided to base the headquarters of the company in the eastern part of Bhutan, which tended to be less developed, get less tourist income for sure. Um, and therefore, I thought we could have a bigger impact in that area.
I love that because you really did not approach it at all from a colonialistic perspective, but really a community building perspective. And relationship, I would imagine relationship building had to be that first barrier. And by choosing to put your corporate headquarters in an area that was less likely to be infiltrated by tourists, gave you that, I think, at least initially, probably created a level of trust. And then also, having an Asian background yourself, as you pointed out, was a way to feel for folks to feel safe, or women.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
listen to you, without being judged.
I wanted to set the perspective of
Yeah.
where we actually set the headquarters because it was a little village, Lingmeitang, that had barely one street. It wasn't really paved the whole way, and it was pretty short. And we lived communally, Justin and Teresa and I, and assorted other colleagues, essentially who would ever show up, including driver or whatever. We didn't have heated water for the first 3 years. We had some immersion wires, but not a really good idea, as it turns out, for sustainability um,
Safety.
or safety. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
seriously.
and water ran much of the year, but some of the year it didn't run. Frankly, Justin and I are mountain people, and we love to hike and climb. Teresa is more of a city girl, and her hair is longer than ours is, and so it was a bigger challenge for her. So she does deserve some credit for not just the vision of headquartering in a little village, but actually or challenges physically that it took the day to day, because there was very limited
Mm-hmm.
vegetable market when we moved there. There actually no vegetable market. It was very hard to get food. Simple.
But I commend you, all three of you, for making that choice because you lived alongside of the people with whom you wanted to impact a change. And when you live alongside and you respect culture, they're more likely to trust that what you're trying to do will actually help them, not exploit them. And that was exactly the purpose of what you were doing, which is really beautiful in every sense of the word. I wish more companies, as I said in my intro, you really serve as a role model. So before we jump into operations, I know Justin came in as the kind of a founding member of that team, and you certainly had experts in the field of agriculture. So in those first few years of trying to get this established, you had to, I imagine, again, I don't know, work with government, work with farmers who were never previously interested, perhaps, or didn't know what the scale or how long it would take, or who would help them grow these plants if they had not a lot of experience. And it takes time to develop nuts. I don't know the timeline. So, talk a little bit about that because you talk about sort of the physical challenge in some way, and I totally appreciate that. But there's also the emotional challenge, and you've been successful. So I'd love for you to walk me through that, and then we'll hop over to Justin.
In China, I built a much bigger agroforestry business where we had many thousands of employees and we had 700,000 farmers growing trees and built big factories and so forth. So I had done this before at scale, and I had managed the creation of an operation. I'd worked closely with government before. The three of us were a troika, and Justin carried the ball for much of the development of the organization and so forth. Yes, the key negotiations at the beginning were managed by Teresa and me with the government. signing our memorandum of understanding with the government and retaining the relationships with the prime minister um, and His Majesty the King. That was something that more we did, but actually all the functional government officials, ministers of state, and so forth, Justin managed that, and Justin built out the operation. It was really fun because the three of us got to co-experience it, but actually he did most of the work. So, Justin, can you talk a little bit about that, if you
Yeah,
don't mind?
jump in, Justin.
It was, everyone comes in with their unique experiences, hopes, wishes, desires, and fears, all of which I had many of. And, I really was attracted to this because had heard of Daniel and knew about some of the things that he had built in his life. And I was much earlier in my career. So I had worked for a while and I had some very deep experiences in actually living in the Himalayas, working with smallholder farmers in parts of Western China, not as deeply as Daniel, but very sort of informative and deep experiences that when I heard about what Daniel did and when he later told me about what he was planning on doing with Teresa and Bhutan, it was hard for me to think about anything else, if I'm honest. When you have a kernel, this idea in your mind and you say maybe this isn't the right thing for me, but it just keeps coming back.
I call that passion.
Yeah, and it's just rare in our lives to have the opportunity to have an impact on so many people if you do it right, but it's also scary because, as you said, it may not come to fruition. It's a lot of people's lives, right, and livelihoods. And so, it's a responsibility, but also one that, I truly think a lot of people don't have that opportunity to do it and actually do it up close. So that's really what attracted me. And I had worked with farmers. I had been dealing with communities, and it was something that I really enjoyed. And so being able to, I just graduated from business school. So being able to merge my, so-called newly minted business acumen with real life experience and doing things that I loved, being outdoors, helping people and working with, mentors like Daniel and Teresa, it was pretty unique experience. So that's where it came for me. And then getting on the ground and really learning the real realities smacked all of us in the face more times than we would probably
Right, I
pretend to
wondered.
remember. But a lot of it was relationship building. It was falling down, picking ourselves back up, making mistakes, but then reinvesting sort of our commitment into the project and figuring it out. And we had so many great collaborators along the way, and we were our sort of own support group. And we were lucky to work with everyone we did. So I think that really, to me, the first year to 2 years was somewhat I hate to say this now, but I won't lie. It was a very fearful time because it was just such a massive
Yeah, for
thing to
sure.
fight off, and learning more and more what we didn't know versus what we knew at first was scary, but then became really exhilarating once we started executing on some of the big sort of goals, and everything flipped, and that's when it started getting really fun. But
Almost with each new day or two, it feels like you had to reprove yourself because you're not of culture. And so even though you think, okay, we did this and people now know who we are and we're set, it would be then another trial that you would face. That's just sort of what came across. I don't know if that's accurate or not. And I give you all credit because to stand in the face of that and know that you are excluded, which you are, because of either your background, your culture, how you look, whatever. In a certain way, Teresa might be the exception because of her background, but also being female too, may or may not have. To then start over again. It's almost like starting kindergarten each time to sort of prove yourself that, yes, we have good intentions. Yes, we believe this will yield both economic support and sustainability, but also will help the environment at the same time.
It is so true. Justin referred to something, and that is the moments of terror one feels when one is starting an ambitious venture, especially something that all the experts say is obviously impossible.
Right. That's a good point.
Frankly, we felt a lot of responsibility for Justin because he was our first serious hire at compensation levels way below what he was being offered to join high-flying venture capital or private equity investors coming out of Stanford
With
Business
an
School.
MBA.
You know,
Right.
he was the catch at Stanford. Um, and he came to work for
Mm-hmm.
pennies
Mm-hmm.
and dreams and um, and social
And
ambitions.
passion and real
But he
passion
had
is
profound
what I hear.
passion, and we shared that real passion, and that was really important. He referred to building relationships. It was something that we had to do at so many levels. It flashed into my mind when there was a new elected government that took over some years ago, and the Minister of Finance didn't have a very strong background in the field, and he, in one context, said to Teresa, "Can you please teach me what I should know as Minister of Finance because you have so much more experience,
Wow.
madam, than I do." And he was humbled that way. He was 20 years younger, and so Teresa
What a huge compliment.
tried to explain international finance from her perspective, which was really invaluable for him because he was really trying to serve the people. But in many ways, we brought a new approach, not just in growing trees and not just in managing, but in a whole host of different things, including engaging with the international financial community. We brought in $30 million of investment, which was
It's amazing.
a significant thing for a small country, and became the biggest private sector employer in the country and did a lot of different things, operating in different ways. And um, to achieve those things required a lot of us to play different roles. I can be a little pushy. Justin is really skillful the way he manages relationships. Teresa, um, with respect, Justin is just on a different level than we are.
I love it.
Justin, you deal with prime ministers and presidents in different countries, but Teresa knows how to just dance a slightly different dance. And so we all acted differently. And then we developed local executives and we empowered them. And then they were able to do things that we couldn't do, obviously, because of their traditional relationships and language and so forth. And and so we developed stepping stone to stepping stone and then up and up and up. And it enabled Justin to feel really comfortable when he was invited to join the Obama White House to go take that, which had always been a dream of his, to go take that, but to be
Mm-hmm.
able to work for such a great leader. And the three of us trained this superb executive
Mm-hmm.
who, at that time, when we hired him, was just an incredibly intelligent scientist with some agricultural background. But the three of us kind of co trained him, and now he's the current CEO of the company. In many ways, what he is involves a lot of what each of us gave him from our hearts.
In some ways, you fulfilled a collective dream that you had to instill in the country both economic sustainability, but also folks who are from the area to actually take over. I have a sort of a silly question, maybe, and I don't mean to be so ignorant, but in Bhutan, I believe they speak a different language. So, how did you communicate actually?
There are a number of local dialects spoken by rural farmers. The medium of education in Bhutan is English.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Is spoken a little bit differently than we were taught. All government officials and most local leaders speak English, and we use that as our primary language of education, of management. I have a background in Tibetan, so I read and write Tibetan. I can speak it. And Tibetan is written in the same way as the local language, Bhutanese or
Mm-hmm.
Zonka, as they call it. Um, Justin is this thrilling linguist, and he was able to develop over time some reasonable fluency. We could never speak all the local dialects, and as Justin mentioned, context is all important. And when you move from one valley to another in a traditional culture, um, you're kind of an outsider.
But amazing because I think language can transcend pieces of that, and even the effort to do that demonstrates to folks on the ground that you're serious about staying and really making a difference on their behalf, which is what you did. And again, it's that combination of business and social consciousness. So, Justin, what did former President Obama say? And congratulations on that fellowship. Quite a coup and pretty incredibly impressive.
Oh, thanks. So it was another amazing life experience. I was, you know, grateful to have the opportunity. I don't want to misquote him. No, I think what I had shared with Daniel and Teresa a while back is that I think on the first sort of meeting with him, we sort of went around. We were sitting at a table, just sort of discussing our backgrounds, and he came prepared and asked everyone to just give him a little bit update on, remind him what we were all doing before, and he sort of stopped the conversation after we talked about mountain hazelnuts, and he goes, "Wait." He goes, "That is very, very cool. Well done, well done." So that to me was, I think, that made everything worth it right there. Not that I was close to him, but
I love it.
I don't want to
That's great.
overemphasize. Yeah.
I think for your listeners and viewers, I just want to emphasize that, building this company really was from scratch. There was no infrastructure, clearing the land, teaching farmers skills, teaching employees skills. Really, there was nothing to draw on. Although, of course, because it's an agrarian economy, they have a sense of what it means to grow things, crops, but really not at this scale, not with these techniques, not pruning, um, not setting up maybe a water tank. I do want to emphasize again that, or for the first time, that there were very few of us who were international staff. When Daniel says we were the largest private employer in the country, that is really only at a certain moment. We have less than 6 to 8 expats. The rest are local staff. Um, and it was hard to get local staff to come out to the eastern part of Bhutan because they all wanted city jobs. And I think that is another issue that occurs in some countries where if if you're ambitious or you want to be in the city, I mean, and the city is small in Bhutan, but going to the rural eastern part of Lingmetang, where really there were very few local businesses or you know, anything like that. So I think that's important for anyone who really wants to think about a social enterprise. You don't get to go in and say, okay, I'm going to convert this into what my version is. You actually have to think about, if I start from scratch, what does that mean? And that is a lot of fear and trial and experimentation. And oh my gosh, I can't believe there's another problem that we didn't think about yesterday. But Bhutan is unique in that I think that once, as you said, people understood we really were sincere, the Ministry of Agriculture and Forests, local officials would go and introduce us to their community, and then the village headman would come out to listen what we were promising or saying about hazelnuts. There was always this very tight collaboration with government officials in Bhutan. And then then it goes into other departments once, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, they all saw that our motivations were sincere.
Was it difficult, and I don't know that this was a necessity for people to then move closer to those rural areas and actually live there versus living closer to a city or in a city? And in doing so, did you have to think about local health care or school education or any of that?
So in the Kingdom of Bhutan, education, healthcare is free. So, and they have throughout the 20 districts schooling, and there will be a public hospital. Our innovation was to bring it to the community. It's easy to say, oh, healthcare is free, but I'm not going to go unless I'm sick, right? Because it's quite a ways to trek there. So we started working with the Ministry of Health to have an annual physical for all of our staff. And we also introduced HIV/AIDS testing. And then, over time, we added other things as we observed other needs. UNICEF came and saw what we were doing and said, oh, what do you need? And I said, well, you emphasize early education. How about building a pre-K school, which they helped fund the local community. So I think it wasn't that we invented anything, except that we worked with services that were already available and tried to expand it and make it more accessible to our staff.
Mhm. Well, I think access then determined that people would stay and want to be employed in areas where they could have access. I also have to wonder whether you then could more easily maybe expand to other areas because you already had set up a model in one local village and then could, because then already the ministry was, or UNICEF, in order to acquire those services. So I give you a huge amount of credit because I think people would be naturally resistant if they knew jobs were only in the city or had that idea and that access was greater in the city. And you were saying, wait a minute, this is a rural area, but there is possibility to create access.
So one of the things that we conceived of from the very beginning was building a replicable model for a social venture. Really thought a lot about how do we create something which can be taken to different industries and different countries, particularly in the Himalayas, but in other parts of Asia. And so we developed a lot of tools also. And as Therese was talking about, we're starting tabla rasa, from ground zero with much of this stuff. And in some cases, actually had to build our own roads. But that means you get to design the road. When it comes to staff training, if people have never worked in a company, you can tell people what a company is supposed to be like. You can explain companies are supposed to have radical transparency and you have to show everything you're doing. And so we leapfrog the normal development steps in companies and jump straight to what is now the current thing to do.
But I love that model in so many ways because it's part of the culture and also because you didn't have to at least initially deal with any bad behavior like behavior that's ingrained that somebody says no, this is the way to do it, which for me begs the question, when you have interns or folks coming for a summer or for 3 months, do you have an orientation that you provide to say this is what we've created and we really would, part of our requirement is that you appreciate and respect what you can come up with ideas because people always want ideas, but that this is the baseline from where you have developed and grown and where people are comfortable and accustomed. So I don't know whether you have kind of an orientation.
Yeah, for us, it was really important to bring people in with the right mentality and respect. And so it wasn't just about giving them a syllabus, but we actually did have a detailed syllabus and giving them an indoctrination, which we did, which typically involved sleeping in a village and trekking into a village and accompanying some of our local staff so they could get the feeling of it. But we were very, very careful in selecting people for their character, not just coming from Stanford, because we actually have had the great good fortune of having many, many applicants in each Stanford Business School class who want to apply to work with us. But but we were also very careful in the characteristics that we hired for amongst Bhutanese. So we looked for what we thought was loyalty and openness and some natural intelligence rather than already having the in-baked skills. And then we felt that we could train the skills. So Therese spent a lot of effort developing curriculum for our training program. So did Justin. But Teresa identified one area, which is um, critical numeracy. And maybe, Teresa, could you explain how you developed that?
I love the name.
It's mental math, right? You don't have to be so precise, but you don't always have pen and paper, believe me, Bhutan. So, having this confidence. And I think a lot of it for us was building confidence in our staff because they've never had a job before, because very few of our staff had gone to university even. There is this kind of, oh, I'm just a village person. This is my first job. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know, how to behave. So we had uniforms and for people so that they could self-identify as we are part of this team. And men and women have the same uniforms, more or less. This is a very strange, and people may not, your listeners are probably too young to remember Toastmasters. But in Bhutan, they're not used to public speaking unless you are a government official. So we had our staff from the beginning um, have to make an introductory speech to the rest of the company. And so they had to do a simple PowerPoint. They were filmed so that they could see their ticks and their, looking away or pointing. Um, and we would do two of those with them. The first one to show how they are untrained, and then right before the presentation, and then during the presentation. And then we had our staff sitting in the audience critiquing because they're not used to saying someone is good or not so good. I mean, everyone is good, but they wouldn't say, volume or eye contact. So it taught our audience, our staff, how to review and critique, and it gave confidence to our new staff, new hires, and introduced them to their colleagues. Um, and so I think simple, like again, those are not things we innovated. We just applied these international best practices and contextualized it.
I love that for so many reasons. One is that it creates a sense of equity, it builds community, it allows for feedback. In my policy class that I teach currently, I actually do a couple things. One is I instruct around feedback. What did you like? Process and content. So both of the things that you talked about, and what would make it even better, because it's hard to give feedback, right? And so I sort of do my social work stuff a little bit in the classroom. And then the other thing that I infuse, which you naturally did, and again, these are not invented stuff, but I don't know that companies, even in the nonprofit sector or classrooms, do enough of this. I have 5 teams of 5 in my class that work on a social issue of their choice, but we have to come. In fact, this coming week we're going to deal with, how are we selecting those? And it's a requirement throughout the semester, and I set it up that each group gives feedback to another group at least. And to me, the biggest compliment is in the final presentations when a group in the audience goes, oh, I gave them that feedback and they're using it. And I said, everybody's job here is to have every group get an A, not just your group. And I believe in healthy competition. I'm not saying that, but I think when you build a community in a classroom or in an environment in a village or in a new situation, you want to foster both that feeling of equity and that feeling of confidence that you pointed out, and the belief that you can do it, and we're going to help you do it in a way that feels as comfortable as we can get you, because a lot of people don't like public speaking. So I love that model, and I think by training folks, you have forever changed, not just with Mountain Hazelnut, but you've forever changed their lives in whatever they do moving forward, whether they stay in that, whether they go for a government, who knows, whatever they're able to do. And so you've really impacted them and the environment, which is truly remarkable. I'd love for you to share an aha moment, whether it was an aha moment with an individual, a group, your own, where you were like, oh gosh, we haven't thought of that. Any moment that sort of, and I'm sure there are many, that stands out for you. And I'd like for each of you to share that, because I think what you've created and done is so remarkable. And again, as I said this before, I feel like a broken record. I wish more organizations and companies would be role models in this way of being able to balance that need for revenue, job creation, and the social consciousness component. And you've done that so beautifully. And I think there are so many areas of the world that could really benefit from your example. So, an aha moment.
Okay, I have one. We each had our own background. So mine was finance. I've been a banker, since,
Since you
eons.
could walk, we know.
So you presume that everyone has some banking or finance.
They balance their checkbook, or maybe they don't.
I was getting a bunch of requests for people to go to the bank. And I said, well, how complicated can this be? Like, why do you have to go to the bank? I mean, this is, 40 minutes of going, coming, you lose half a day. And they said, well, because we don't have an ATM, we have to physically, go to a branch and get money. And I thought, oh my gosh, I never realized, how silly of me. And so we petitioned our bank to put in an ATM machine. And I thought, okay, well, that would be simple and fine and everything would be hunky dory. But then, they locked it up at night because it was so precious. And then it was such a new thing that people were putting rocks in there or like, stuffing things and I realized, okay, things that we take for granted. And look, we've been in Asia since, the 80s. We just take things for granted. And even though we think we're in, have had all this experience in Bhutan, there were still things we didn't, or I didn't comprehend um, or absorb right away. And I should have because, I, I don't know why I never noticed that people were doing this.
I don't think that you should have had to recognize anything. These are things that come organically because, as you said, we're used to it. Like Dan said in the beginning, like we can go to the store and get fresh vegetables. I mean, relatively speaking, depending upon, locally where you are. And so you don't anticipate things that that are so ingrained in our everyday lives. So I love that. And eventually, what happened with the ATM machine? Did people get used to it?
Yes, they got used to it. And then I said, "Oh, what if we opened like a little counter on our premises?" And so the bank manager, sent 2 people or 3 people once a month, and we built this, nice bench for them. And then one day I was walking down the street, and this man said to me, "Oh, it's you." And I turned around, and I guess I'm probably the only person. Yep, okay, foreign woman right now. And he said, "This is the bank president. And because of you, we are going to open a branch in this,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
okay, and it's not, full counter services, but, it was a branch. Um,
Yeah.
and I was so excited because I thought, well, that is even better because then they started, giving more loans and more
Mm-hmm.
services. And then, it's just another example of something that can happen from just a very small observation.
So stay tuned for part 2 of Mountain Hazelnuts, where you will hear the aha moments of Justin and Danielle, because we heard Teresa's already, and more of the operations and philosophy behind Mountain Hazelnuts. All of the Small and Gutsy episodes can be found on the Intrinsic Group website, which has a Small and Gutsy page. The opinions and viewpoints expressed by our guests are independent and do not reflect the position of Small and Gutsy. Of course, we can't take responsibility outside of our own vetting of the organizations we interview, so before you sign on to support or work for them, we encourage you to do your own due diligence and research them as well. We just want you to learn about the Small and Gutsy nonprofit and social impact organizational sector so they can spread their story and their impactful work. I want to thank my partners in this endeavor, the Intrinsic Group, my brilliant sound engineer and composer, Pavel Franson, my very talented graphic designer, Nate Addy. Please check out their bios on the Intrinsic website. My incredible board of directors, Tracy Brown, John Gatto, Lucy Mello, Serena Rajabian, who believed in me and this project enough so to sign on to support this effort, and all of the folks, friends, and family who have guided and inspired me. A very special thank you to my biggest champion, #1 fan, and best friend, without whom none of this would be possible. Thanks, Mark Witkoff. Thanks for being there. And thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends, give us some stars, and write a review on wherever you listen to podcasts. From small and gutsy to big with impact, I'm Laura Witkoff. Thanks for listening.